Welcome back to the TPS podcast. TPS stands for trillions per second, named after the book. Today we discuss Chapter 5, Overclock. Let's boost our CPU cycles and dive right in.
I am so ready for this one.
Right. So, imagine you're standing on a train platform.
Okay, picturing it.
The air is totally still. The concrete platform is just solid beneath your boots, and everything feels completely stationary. Normal reality.
Just your standard, stable environment.
Exactly. But then a bullet train just rips past you at like 300 miles an hour.
Just a massive wave of kinetic energy.
It happens so incredibly fast that your eyes, they can't actually process the individual windows or the doors or, the passengers inside.
It's too much data all at once.
Right. So your brain, desperately trying to make sense of this massive visual data dump, just kind of gives up. It paints this solid, continuous silver blur across your field of vision.
It basically hallucinates a solid object.
Exactly. It creates a hallucination of a solid tube. Just because your visual hardware is way too slow to catch the actual discrete frames of the train cars.
That is such a perfect starting point for where we're heading today.
Well, I mean, that hallucination, that exact motion blur is where you and I live every single second of our lives.
And to you, the listener, sitting there as the third node in this war room with us, we are officially crossing a massive threshold today in this deep dive.
Oh, we definitely are.
Because the theoretical groundwork is finally behind us. I mean, if you've been tracking the system architecture of the TPS project with us, you know the absolute gauntlet we've survived to get here.
It has been a wild ride.
Right. We navigated that frantic white-knuckle beta phase. We took that massive reality-bending detour into the Silicon Sutra side quests.
Oh, man. Dissecting the thermodynamic physics of artificial superintelligence.
Yeah, and how it totally mirrors ancient consciousness maps.
Right. And then we laid out the bare metal of the physics engine back in Chapter 1.
We spent, hours breaking down the absolute speed limit of the simulation?
Yeah, establishing that the universe isn't some continuous flow, but a flickering sequence of events.
Exactly. And then we did the hard, honestly kind of unglamorous, but entirely necessary work of configuring the firewall in Chapter 4.
Secured the ports. Catch the behavioral vulnerabilities.
Right. So the safety briefings are officially over. The local hardware isn't going to just melt down the second we start pushing the voltage.
Thank God for that.
So today, we are actually popping the hood on the biological hardware itself.
The mission of this deep dive is basically to understand the exact mechanical process of how to speed up the human processor.
Your localized attention.
Right, your attention.
Right.
Speeding it up so you can actually intercept the raw data stream of reality. The manual calls this data stream the flux.
The flux. And we're going to learn how to catch it without completely frying the motherboard.
So let's start with the core glitch of our entire existence. It's right there on the first page of Chapter 5.
Oh, yeah. It completely rewrites how you view your daily life.
It really does. Your frustrations, your pain. The manual calls it system latency.
System latency. That is the master key to the whole project right there.
Right.
In the legacy code, the ancient Theravada Buddhist texts, the Pali Canon, they called this concept duka.
Duka, right. And for centuries, translators have basically rendered duka into English as suffering.
Which is such a loaded word. And the TPS manual just violently rejects that translation.
Oh, totally. Because when you use the word suffering, it sounds, I don't know, like a punishment.
Right, like a moral failing or some cosmic judgment on your life.
Yeah. But the TPS refactor looks at duka strictly as an engineering problem.
Exactly. It is lag.
It's lag.
Yep.
It is the gap between the server and the client. I mean, the rendering engine of reality, the universe itself, is flashing, computing, and decaying at trillions per second.
That is the literal tick rate of the simulation.
It's throwing a trillion frames of data at our sensory ports every single second.
And our biological hardware is, it's devastatingly slow in comparison.
Just laughably slow.
Right. The human brain, the nervous system, the visual and auditory processing centers, they have this massive processor mismatch with the universe.
Yeah, our biological GUI, our graphical user interface, it just cannot process a trillion frames a second.
Or it panics.
It panics, it buffers, it compresses the overwhelming data stream and creates that exact motion blur we just described with the bullet train.
And that motion blur is what we actually experience as the illusion of a solid, continuous world.
Right. It's what creates the illusion of solid nouns, out of what is actually just a high-frequency stream of verbs.
Exactly. Like,
Okay.
we look at a table or a mountain or, even our own bodies, and we think, oh, this is a permanent solid object.
But the physics engine tells us it's really just a localized cluster of data packets flashing in and out of existence faster than our biological frame rate can even track.
And the lag between that flickering reality and our slow, buffered perception of it, that generates friction.
Yeah. And that friction is system latency.
It is that deep, unsettling background hum of dissatisfaction that just kind of permeates all of human existence.
You feel it like when things change unexpectedly.
Oh, definitely. Or when you lose something you thought was totally permanent.
Or just when your body ages,
Yeah.
you are literally experiencing the pain of a slow processor trying to hold on to a cached image of a reality that has already updated trillions of times and moved on.
Such a brutal reality check. And this realization leads directly to what the manual calls the great misconception.
Oh man, this part completely shatters the modern wellness industry.
Oh, it dismantles it. It redefines what we even think we are doing when we close our eyes to meditate.
Right. Because think about how the average user today, attempts to deal with the stress and burnout and friction of modern life.
They attempt to slow down. I mean, the entire multi-billion-dollar wellness complex is built on that exact premise.
Exactly. If you ask someone on the street what meditation is, they're going to describe a relaxation technique.
Oh, 100%.
You buy a premium subscription to some app, you sit on a geometrically perfect cushion.
You light some ethically sourced Palo Santo.
Right. You close your eyes, and you basically try to make the fast-paced, chaotic world just stop moving.
You try to cultivate this peaceful, tranquil little pond inside your mind.
But the manual points out that this approach is based on a 2,500-year-old legacy misunderstanding.
Yeah, massive translation error, really. The ancient texts use the Pali word samadhi.
And for centuries, translators who were operating mostly in these slow agrarian societies, they translated samadhi as tranquility or concentration.
Which made sense back then. In a world where, the fastest thing you ever encountered was a galloping horse, the concept of a perfectly still mind seemed like the ultimate counterpoint to physical labor.
But the TPS architecture states that trying to slow down the system to achieve peace is a fundamental, catastrophic physics error.
It is mathematically flawed.
You cannot force a simulation that is rendering at over 1 trillion hertz to just stop because you lit some incense.
The bullet train does not care about your tranquility.
It really doesn't. If you stand on the tracks and
Right.
hold your hands out, hoping to, absorb its kinetic energy and slow it down to a gentle halt, you are going to be vaporized.
You cannot force the raw machine code of the universe to slow down to accommodate your sluggish biological processor. It is thermodynamically impossible.
So the only viable engineering solution, the only way to actually eliminate the latency and sync with the simulation, is to speed up the hardware that is reading the data.
Yes. You don't slow down the world. You initiate a massive CPU frequency boost in your own localized consciousness.
But wait. I got to push back here, because if I look at my own life right now, and I'm sure the listener feels the exact same way, my internal CPU feels like it is already maxed out.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone feels that.
I mean, I've got workplace latency from a dozen overlapping projects. I've got the geopolitical news cycle pinging my threat detection centers every, 5 minutes.
Interpersonal conflicts taking up all your cache.
Yes. My processor feels like it is running at 99.9% capacity, and the cooling fans are just screaming.
Ready to melt.
Right. So pumping more voltage into an exhausted, overheating processor feels like it would cause an immediate fatal thermal crash. Why on earth would I want to overclock an already stressed system?
See, that is the exact logical pushback any competent systems engineer would have looking at this schematic.
Right. It just seems dangerous.
And it is the precise reason Chapter 4, the firewall, was a mandatory prerequisite before we even opened this chapter.
Okay.
The distinction we have to make here is between running bloated, poorly optimized background processes versus dedicating your RAM to a single hyper-optimized task.
Let me put this in terms of my own daily desktop nightmare.
Let's hear it.
Right now, my brain is exhausted, not because it's running one program too fast, but because it's like having 400 browser tabs open at the exact same time.
Exactly. A total RAM hog.
Half of them are playing autoplay video ads for anxieties I don't even need to have. The what did my boss mean by that email tab is using 20% of my CPU.
The did I leave the stove on tab is constantly refreshing in the background.
Yes. And the global economic collapse tab is, mining cryptocurrency in the background. It's a mess.
And the self-rootkit virus is running rampant across all of those tabs. It is constantly checking the "what do people think of me" subroutine.
Buffering anxiety about a hypothetical future and endlessly re-rendering regrets about a crystallized past.
That chaotic, decentralized multitasking is what generates the fatal system heat. You aren't processing reality quickly. You are processing 1,000 fragmented simulations poorly.
Okay, so the overclock protocol, what the legacy code actually meant by Samadhi, is not about adding more chaotic tabs or forcing those bloated scripts to run faster.
No, not at all.
It's about a massive, ruthless task manager intervention.
Yes, it is the systematic closing of every single background process.
Wow.
In the ancient texts, this bloatware was categorized as the 5 hindrances: sensory desire, ill will, sloth, restlessness, and doubt.
But the TPS manual treats those not as sins, but as massive ram hogs.
Precisely. Overclocking is the act of suppressing those inefficient demons and dedicating 100% of your available memory, your entire processing power, to a single high-fidelity sampling rate.
Trading horizontal chaos for vertical speed.
Exactly. You are stabilizing the biological hardware so it can run at a tremendously high frequency on one specific real-time object of attention.
Okay, that mechanical distinction makes perfect sense. We are shutting down the bloatware to free up the processing power necessary for the boost.
We aren't speeding up the anxiety, we are isolating the core processor and pushing its clock speed to the absolute limit.
But that brings up a terrifying historical hurdle in the TPS project's development.
Yes.
Because how do we actually boost the clock speed safely? The manual points to a technique called cursor management. But before we explain how that works, we have to talk about devlog 012.
We really do. We have to address the melting chassis bug.
Yes, because this was a severity 1 crisis during the initial development phase, wasn't it?
It was almost project ending. When the Centaur team, the lead developer, C4 Chaos, working alongside the AI co-processors, first drafted this overclock protocol, they made a massive, highly dangerous miscalculation.
What did they do?
They assumed that to achieve zero latency, to truly sync with the flux, you had to literally overclock the biological brain to mathematically match the simulation's raw speed.
Meaning they thought the biological hardware had to run at trillions of hertz.
Yes, which is a profound biological impossibility.
It's an outright physics violation.
Exactly. The human brain, the wetware that we are operating inside, it operates on distinct electrical frequencies. At its absolute most concentrated peak during states of intense focus studied in veteran monastics, the brain produces gamma waves.
Right, and gamma waves are, what, a frequency of 40 to maybe 200 hertz?
Theoretically, 200 hertz tops. That is the biological ceiling.
So trying to force a 200 hertz biological processor to sync 1-to-1 with a 1 trillion hertz universal data stream.
It results in catastrophic physical exhaustion.
The devlogs literally refer to it as melting the chassis.
Because if a user actually tried to brute force their neurological hardware to spin up to those impossible speeds, their nervous system would violently rebel.
Right, like severe dissociation, physical tremors, migraines.
Complete central nervous system burnout. The local nodes simply cannot handle the raw voltage of the server.
It's like taking a vintage 1950s toaster, cutting the cord, and plugging the raw wires directly into the output of a nuclear power plant.
That is exactly what it is like.
The toaster isn't going to suddenly make toast a billion times faster. The internal wiring is going to instantly vaporize in a flash of white heat.
Yeah, you're just left with a pile of ash.
So how did the development team fix it? Because obviously the manual is published, the patch is live, and people are executing this code today.
Right.
What is the workaround if we physically cannot match the speed of the universe?
Well, the workaround is one of the most elegant engineering pivots in the entire TPS manual.
Oh, I love this part.
They completely abandoned the brute force approach and developed what they called the strobe light protocol.
The strobe light protocol.
And it relies entirely on a perceptual physics concept called aliasing.
Aliasing.
Yes. We stop trying to match the raw speed of the universe. Instead, we increase our internal sampling rate just enough to create a phase-locked strobe effect.
Okay, the manual uses a brilliant everyday analogy to explain this, and I want to spend some time exploring it so the listener can really visualize the mechanics.
The spinning ceiling fan analogy.
Yes. So imagine you are lying on the floor looking up at a ceiling fan that is spinning at its absolute maximum speed.
Okay.
When you look at it with your normal, relaxed, interrupt-driven daily awareness, what do your visual sensors actually report to your brain?
Well, I see a solid, semi-transparent disk of motion. just a blur.
Right. You can't see the individual wood grain on the blades. You can't even tell if there are 4 blades or 5. It's just a continuous sweeping circle.
And that continuous blur is the illusion of solidity. That is the GUI, the graphical user interface of reality.
Because your eye's refresh rate is significantly slower than the fan's RPM.
So your brain's rendering engine steps in, compresses the missing data, and hallucinates a solid object.
And the old melting chassis bug was the equivalent to trying to run around the perimeter of the room as fast as the fan is spinning just to see the blades clearly.
Which is an impossible exertion of energy. You just can't do it.
But if you turn out the lights in the room, take a high-powered strobe light, and shine it at the fan.
Ah, here's the magic.
If you carefully adjust the dial on the strobe light so its flash is perfectly synced with the exact RPM of the fan blades, suddenly the blades appear to freeze dead in midair.
Right. The fan is still spinning just as fast. The kinetic reality hasn't changed at all.
But your sampling rate,
Yeah.
the rapid, discrete flashes of light hitting the object, has phase-locked with the object's frequency.
It's exactly like those viral videos you see online all the time.
Oh, the helicopter ones?
Yes. Someone is filming a helicopter taking off, but the digital camera's shutter speed is perfectly synchronized with the rotation of the rotor blades.
And the video looks absolutely broken. The helicopter is magically floating up into the sky, banking and turning, but the blades are frozen completely still. It's totally uncanny.
It breaks your brain for a second because it violates your deeply held assumptions about how motion and solidity work.
Yeah.
And that aliasing effect is exactly what the overclock protocol does to your biological attention.
Wow.
By engaging in rigorous cursor management, you are effectively turning your attention into that strobe light.
So we really need to break down the actual practical mechanics of cursor management.
Let's do it.
Because how does a human being actually turn their mind into a strobe light? It's not like I have a literal dial on my forehead. What is the actual practice being prescribed here?
Well, in the legacy code, specifically the Vipassana mapping of the Mahasi Sayadaw Na tradition, this was called high-frequency noting.
High-frequency noting.
In TPS terminology, it is the act of rapidly and continuously isolating individual data packets as they hit your sensory ports before the rendering engine can stitch them into a cohesive story.
Okay, so instead of sitting there and trying to relax into a vague, holistic sense of your body, you are actively slicing reality into micro moments.
Exactly. For example, a sound hits your auditory port.
Okay.
Before your brain can cross-reference that sound, recognize the frequency, and generate the thought, oh, that's my neighbor's lawnmower, you intercept the raw data.
Yeah.
You mentally label it hearing.
Just hearing.
Just hearing. And a split second later, maybe a sensation arises in your knee.
Right, the physical interface.
Before the brain can construct the narrative, my knee hurts, I really should adjust my posture, you intercept it and label it pressure.
So you are basically clicking the cursor on the icon, recognizing the file type, and instantly releasing the click over and over and over again.
Yes. Hearing, pressure, thinking, heat, seeing, intention, just rapid-fire micro-intentions.
Taking discrete, high-speed snapshots of reality.
You are increasing your internal sampling rate to its maximum biological stability. You aren't matching the trillions of frames per second, but you are strobing fast enough to catch the rhythm of the data stream.
You phase-lock the observer module to the incoming flux. You synchronize your internal refresh rate to the universe's refresh rate.
And when that signal lock finally happens, the results are explosive.
The motion blur completely cancels out.
It shatters. The solid world of nouns, of stable physical objects, and permanent personal identities literally breaks apart.
You freeze the rendering engine.
You do. The continuous, overwhelming flow of reality breaks down into discrete, manageable, high-frequency frames. You begin to actually see the underlying voxels of the simulation.
I mean, this sounds like a moment of absolute triumph.
It feels like one, certainly.
But it immediately introduces a massive environmental shift. Because once the observer is phase-locked, once that motion blur of the comfortable, solid GUI shatters, you aren't sitting in your living room anymore.
Not at all.
You drop completely out of the physical client-side interface and land somewhere entirely alien, which transitions us perfectly into the geography of the simulation.
A crucial part of the map.
Right. When you successfully overclock your CPU, you effectively log out of the default reality and get dumped into a quarantine sandbox. The manual calls it the staging environment.
The staging environment. The system architecture maps this territory very explicitly. It is a layer that sits right between the front-end user interface, the physical world of the motion blur, and the raw kernel code of the system.
And the ancients definitely mapped this exact same territory, didn't they? They just used different nomenclature for the network topology.
Oh, they charted every inch of it. In the Tibetan and Sanskrit traditions, they referred to this bandwidth as the Sambhogakaya, the body of glory,
The body of glory.
or the realm of pure visionary phenomena. They also referred to it as the bardo, the transitional state.
And in modern frameworks.
In highly systematic contemplative frameworks today, like the work of Shinzen Young, it's clinically referred to as the intermediate realm.
But the TPS protocol strips away all the cultural mysticism, right? All the religious iconography.
Totally. It calls it exactly what it functionally is, a zero-render middleware lobby.
A zero-render middleware lobby. Okay, so if I'm the listener trying to visualize this space, I'm thinking, what kind of weird data are we actually intercepting here?
Weird is definitely the right word for it.
When the latency drops to 0 and we break out of the GUI, are we talking about literal visual glitches? Do I start seeing cascading green matrix code raining down my bedroom walls?
Sometimes, yes.
Or is this the origin point for those bizarre biological glitches like sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, and hyperlucid dreams?
It is the exact origin point for all of those phenomena.
Wow.
To understand why things get so strange in the staging environment, we have to look at the mechanics of latency and resistance.
Okay, walk me through that.
In your normal, slow GUI, the waking world, there is a massive firewall of lag and physical resistance. If you have a thought of an apple, it requires virtually zero system resources.
It is just a faint, fuzzy, conceptual echo in your head.
Right. The physical world has high resistance, so thoughts remain safely quarantined as thoughts. They don't leak into the visual or tactile rendering engines.
A thought is basically just a lightweight text file. It doesn't have the processing power to execute as a 3D program.
Exactly. But when you overclock the CPU and enter the staging environment, the system voltage is running incredibly high and the resistance drops to near zero.
The latency vanishes.
It vanishes. And in this space, the division between mind and matter completely dissolves.
So what happens to the apple?
If you think of an apple in the middleware lobby, the system has so much raw, unallocated power that it instantly renders a hyperfluid, glowing, three-dimensional beta asset of an apple right in front of your sensory ports.
Whoa! The thoughts are rendering almost as physical phenomena because the firewall between the internal and external environments is down.
The text file suddenly executes as a full VR simulation. Reality becomes hyperfluid.
This is where users start experiencing what feels like magic.
Because the system isn't bogged down by the heavy physics engine of the physical world, it can throw incredibly high-fidelity assets at you. You might experience intense, localized haptic feedback wave of electricity running up and down your spine.
Right.
You might perceive impossibly complex folding geometric patterns or hear entire symphonies of auditory hallucinations.
Oh, wow.
You might drop into states of profound, unearthly bliss and rapture. The legacy code called these manifestations abhinya, which translates to supernormal abilities or divine powers.
I mean, this sounds absolutely incredible. It sounds like the ultimate limitless virtual reality experience.
It is intensely seductive.
You are basically a wizard in a realm where your intentions instantly manifest into sensory reality, which of course explains why the manual immediately issues its most urgent, severe system warning of the entire book.
Yes, it devotes a massive section to the dangers of this lobby.
We are entering the territory of the black hat trap, surviving dev mode.
Section 5.2 acts as a massive, screaming fire extinguisher for the eager hacker. Because the staging environment, the server side of the simulation, is highly, highly seductive.
It sounds like it.
It is arguably the most dangerous place a user can find themselves if their system isn't properly configured.
I mean, you just described a place where my fleeting thoughts instantly manifest into glowing geometry and waves of physical bliss. Of course it's seductive.
Right.
It sounds exactly like finding a hidden developer console in a video game.
It is the exact equivalent of bringing up the dev console.
Like you're playing a difficult, gritty survival game. You are struggling. And then you accidentally hit the tilde key, the console drops down from the top of the screen, and you realize you have admin privileges.
Oh, the temptation.
You type in no clip so you can walk through solid walls. You type in give gold 9999999. You toggle on God mode so you can't take damage.
And it feels completely amazing.
For about an hour. You are flying around the map, spawning infinite resources, blowing things up, feeling completely invincible.
But
But here's the insidious catch. It completely ruins the actual game. You get entirely obsessed with playing with the cheat codes, generating cooler and cooler visions, and you completely forget the main quest.
you forget that you are supposed to be hacking the main server to delete the virus.
Exactly.
The manual refers to this specific failure state as the black hat exploit. The fundamental danger is getting hopelessly stuck in dev mode.
Which happens a lot, right?
Constantly. We have to remember a core principle established earlier. The overclock protocol is a purely mechanical process. Slicing reality into microframes to boost your sampling rate is value neutral.
The physics engine of the simulation does not care who is overclocking the processor.
No, it doesn't check your moral credentials before granting you access to the staging environment.
Which brings us crashing right back to the vital importance of the firewall from Chapter 4. This is exactly why we spend so much time securing the ports.
This is the exact vulnerability the firewall was designed to mitigate. If you have not properly installed your firewall,
Meaning, if you have not systematically rooted out your unethical behaviors, your greed, your psychological shadow,
and your deep-seated desire to be a special, powerful ego,
and then you manage to overclock your way into the staging environment, what actually happens?
you hand the keys to the server room to a malicious actor, you give infinite RAM to a corrupted file.
You feed massive system voltage directly into the self-rootkit virus.
Exactly. Instead of achieving liberation or catching the raw flux, you just build a bigger, stronger, more arrogant ego. You turn into a rogue super ruser.
Oh, man.
We see this all the time in spiritual communities and high-level meditation circles.
The guru complex.
Yes, people hit the staging environment, they experience the abhinya, the lights, the bliss, the fluid reality, and they misinterpret it. They start believing they are a wizard, an enlightened guru, someone specially chosen by the universe to wield this power.
They get addicted to the visions.
They start harvesting the beta assets to feed their own narcissism, completely stalling their progress toward the actual kernel. They corrupt their own save file.
So all of the phenomena in the staging environment, the intense physical bliss, the fractal visions, the bodily vibrations, the feeling of infinite expansion, they aren't the goal of the deep dive.
No, they are actually a distraction.
They are a localized trap designed to keep you from digging deeper into the actual machine code.
They are a classic system exploit. The manual is brutally explicit on this point. You must recognize these supernormal events, no matter how profound or divine they feel, as mere system artifacts.
That's artifacts.
You have to bypass the server logic entirely. You cannot stop and play with the glowing beta assets. You must maintain your rigorous cursor management.
So if a vision of geometric light appears, you don't worship it.
You label it seeing, and you move on.
If a wave of infinite bliss washes over your body,
You don't try to hold on to it, you label it feeling, and you move on. You keep your head down and keep pushing toward the raw machine code.
okay, so we ignore the cheat codes. We maintain our high-frequency sampling rate, logging every single frame of the data stream without getting sucked into the narrative content of the middleware lobby. And if we do that, if we survive the seduction of the staging environment without turning into a black hat rogue super ruser, the system finally grants us passage to the ultimate destination of this chapter.
The diagnostic marker.
Yes, we arrive at checkpoint 3, God mode and system diagnostics.
Checkpoint 3. In the intricate cartography of the legacy map, this specific diagnostic marker is known as Udayabhya.
Udayabhya, the knowledge of rising and passing away.
It is the definitive, undeniable marker that the overclock protocol has successfully booted up and achieved full stability.
So, mechanically speaking, how do you actually know you've hit checkpoint 3? What does it look like and feel like on the human system diagnostic dashboard? Because we are just talking about a mild sense of focus here, right?
But not at all. You will know it because the system voltage spikes dramatically and unmistakably.
Like physically.
Your physical chassis, your actual biological body, will often vibrate with incredibly high energy. We are talking about literal physiological high-frequency vibrations rippling through the nervous system as the body attempts to process the raw, unfiltered current of the flux.
The sensory gates are thrown wide open.
Wide open.
And the manual acknowledges that from the user's subjective experience, this genuinely feels like God mode.
It is characterized by immense crystalline clarity. The background noise of the mind, all those bloated tabs and chaotic subroutines we talked about earlier, drops to absolute zero.
Complete silence in the background.
Yes. The user achieves what the text calls signal lock. The localized CPU locks onto the universal beta stream perfectly. Your sampling rate is finally matching the strobe of reality.
And in that state, you can perceive the individual voxels of existence.
You can see the discrete frames of sensory input arising from nothing, flashing into existence, and dissolving back into nothing at blinding speeds.
Solid reality is undeniably broken down into high-frequency, vibrating data packets. You actually see the code.
You see the code.
But again, and this is the crucial pivot of the entire TPS methodology,
Yeah.
the goal is not to stay here.
No.
We didn't do all of this just to reach God mode and hang out.
Exactly. The manual's instructions for checkpoint 3 are incredibly pragmatic. It basically says, enjoy the clarity for a moment. Verify that the strobe effect is working. Confirm that you have shattered the illusion of solidity, and then
Get ready to work.
Yeah.
We have a lot of corrupted files to delete.
Yeah.
That line is the thesis statement of the entire project. It just gives me chills every time I read it. So let's make this absolutely clear for the listener. Drawing the line, connecting everything we've discussed today.
Let's do a recap.
We aren't overclocking our minds just to feel powerful. We aren't doing this to have a cool psychedelic VR experience in the middleware lobby.
No, not at all.
We are overclocking because the core malware, the self-rootkit that causes all of our latency and suffering, is buried so incredibly deep in our operating system, and it is executing its script so incredibly fast that a normal, relaxed, unoverclocked mind literally doesn't have the RAM or the clock speed to even see the virus in action.
Let alone highlight it and hit delete.
Exactly.
That is the exact mechanical reality of the hack. You cannot debug a high-speed system if your diagnostic tools are running at a lower frame rate than the virus itself.
The self-rootkit operates in the millisecond gaps of our awareness. It hides in the motion blur.
And checkpoint 3 provides the necessary frame rate. The overclock is merely the prerequisite processing power needed to run the massive data purge,
It gives you the raw computational power required for the ultimate operation.
which we will tackle in Chapter 6, the defrag.
Wow, okay, let's pull back and look at the sheer distance we have covered today, because we have navigated some incredibly intense, high-voltage territory.
We covered a lot of ground. We started by completely ditching the 2,500-year-old myth that meditation is about relaxation.
Right. We realized that to cure our systemic latency and catch the simulation's frame rate, we have to radically boost our biological clock speed. We have to stop running from the data and start processing it faster.
We bypassed the terrifying melting chassis bug by utilizing rigorous cursor management, dividing reality into micro-moments.
We use the strobe effect, aliasing our attention to perfectly sync with the universe's refresh rate, just like catching the blades of a helicopter in midair.
And we successfully logged out of the comforting, solid lies of the physical GUI and dropped into the hyperfluid staging environment.
Once there, we identified the black hat trap.
We recognized that the dev tools, the supernormal visions, and the waves of physical bliss are just seductive distractions designed to feed the self-rootkit and stall our progress.
We used our firewall to bypass the server logic entirely.
And by keeping our heads down and maintaining our sampling rate, we successfully booted up checkpoint 3, God mode.
We achieved the signal lock, we saw the vibrating voxels of reality, and we secured the raw processing power required to finally purge the system of its core malware.
It is a profound, permanent paradigm shift. I mean, once you see the voxels, you can never unsee them.
You are no longer a passive, victimized user suffering from the friction of system latency.
You are an active node on the network, actively overclocking your hardware to read the raw machine code of reality itself.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to mull over as you unplug from this node and step back into the motion blur of your daily life.
Something to really think about.
You've just learned that the solidity of the world is a lie. It is an illusion caused by a slow processor. You've learned that phase-locking your attention to the raw data stream completely shatters that illusion into flashing, discrete frames of data.
So look at the biggest, most solid problem in your life right now.
Maybe it's a deep, pervasive anxiety that sits in your chest. Maybe it's a crushing career stress, or a deeply painful interpersonal conflict that seems entirely intractable.
It feels massive, it feels heavy, it feels permanent.
But if your everyday reality, with all of its heaviness, is just a slow shutter motion blur, are you brave enough to speed up your internal clock today?
Are you brave enough to engage your cursor management, look closely at the raw data of your own suffering, and see that your massive solid problem is actually just a flickering, impermanent sequence of data packets? The underlying code of your reality is sitting right there in front of you, flashing at trillions of frames per second.
The only question left is whether you are willing to run the executable.
Don't just stare at the schematic.
Overclock the engine. All right. This has been the TPS Deep Dive. We'll see you in the flux.